Imagine a couple sitting in a quiet kitchen on a Tuesday evening, surrounded by the glowing screens of two laptops and the lukewarm remains of a $28 delivery order. They are part of the 49.6% of married couple families that the Bureau of Labor Statistics identifies as dual-income households. On paper, they are winning. They have out-earned their parents, secured the promotions, and checked every box of the modern professional dream. Yet, as they look at their bank statement, the math doesn't seem to care about their hard work. There is a persistent phantom pressure on their capital that feels less like a series of choices and more like a mandatory tax on their very existence. We are often told that the path to financial freedom is simply a matter of earning more or working harder. But there is a structural gravity at play that most financial advice ignores. The modern economy has created a curious paradox where the more we earn by trading our time, the more we are forced to buy that time back just to keep the gears turning. When both adults in a household work long hours, the tasks required to maintain a human life, cooking, cleaning, commuting, and childcare, don't simply vanish. They are outsourced. What used to be labor performed within the home becomes a recurring fixed overhead. This transition transforms variable expenses into a monthly minimum that must be paid before a single dollar can be put toward long-term wealth. It creates a cycle where you grind to pay for the conveniences that allow you to continue grinding. To understand why the grind feels so inescapable, we have to look at the primary pillars of the American household budget. According to the 2024 Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditures Report, housing remains the undisputed heavyweight, costing the average household $26,266 per year, or roughly 33.4% of total spending. But housing is a static wall. The real friction often comes from the secondary costs that support that housing. When we choose a home based on proximity to a high-paying job market, we often inherit a transportation burden that the same report pins at $13,318 annually, representing 17% of total spending. This is where the second rent begins to compound. For many, that 17% isn't just fuel and insurance, it's the cost of the commute itself. Despite the rise of remote work, the Bureau of Labor Statistics Economics Daily reported that in 2024, only 10% of private sector workers had access to commuting subsidies. For the other 90%, the cost of moving their bodies to a place of employment is a pure deduction from their gross pay. It is a paid substitute for the time they no longer have. Let's look at a hypothetical household to see how these numbers actually move. We'll call them the Miller family. They earn a combined $150,000 a year. After taxes, they might see about $9,500 a month. Their mortgage, insurance, and utilities take up $3,200. Their 2 cars and associated costs eat another $1,100. At this point, they have $5,200 left. It sounds like a lot until you account for the time deficit expenses. Because they both work 50 hours a week, they spend $600 a month on prepared meals and another $300 on a bi-weekly cleaning service, because the weekend is the only time they have to actually see each other. Then comes the most significant overhead for the modern dual-income family, childcare. Child Care Aware of America reported that in 2024, the average annual cost for childcare reached $13,128, a staggering 29% increase since 2020. If the Millers have 2 children, they are likely looking at over $2,000 a month just for the privilege of going to work. This brings their leftover cash down to $2,300. Suddenly, a 6-figure income feels remarkably thin. The math shows that the Millers aren't overspending on flat-screen televisions. They are paying a high-interest premium on their own time. It is worth pausing to consider the psychological shift in how we handle our resources. The Atlanta Fed survey of consumer payment choice noted that the average amount of cash held on a person dropped from $81 in 2023 to just $67 in 2024. We are moving toward a frictionless digital economy where every convenience is a subscription or a tap. This frictionlessness is precisely what allows the second rent to grow unnoticed. When payment is invisible, the transition from "I'm choosing this today" to "I need this to survive the week" happens without a sound. This brings us to the concept of time poverty. The Levy Economics Institute found in 2025 that roughly 39% of single adults experience significant time poverty, with employed women facing a 9-point gap compared to men. When you are time poor, you cannot bargain hunt, you cannot repair things yourself, you cannot meal prep. You are forced to accept the highest price point because it is the one that fits into your narrow window of availability. This is the structural trap. Your high-income job creates a time deficit, and the market provides a solution that consumes the very surplus that job was supposed to provide. The grind is often sold as a temporary state, a sprint toward a finish line where wealth awaits. But if the costs of maintaining that sprint scale alongside your income, the finish line keeps moving. Every promotion often comes with a higher expectation of availability, which further deepens the time deficit. This leads to more outsourcing, grocery delivery services, dog walkers, lawn care, and premium convenience apps. These are not luxuries for the Millers. They are the logistics of a two-career household. Without these services, the household structure would collapse under the weight of its own obligations. Of course, this isn't a universal law of nature. This depends entirely on one's location and the specific demands of their industry. Someone living in a low-cost-of-living area with a robust family support network will see these numbers very differently. Reasonable people disagree on whether these conveniences are truly mandatory or simply the result of lifestyle creep that has been rebranded as necessity. Some argue that the time saved by these services is better spent on personal development or family bonding, making the cost worth it. This doesn't apply if a household has reached a level of income where the marginal cost of these services is negligible compared to their hourly earning power. We should also address a fair counterargument that these expenditures are actually investments in human capital. One could argue that paying for childcare and a cleaning service allows a professional to focus entirely on their career, leading to faster promotions and much higher lifetime earnings. In this view, the second rent is just the cost of doing business in a competitive world. While that is a valid perspective, it assumes that the career trajectory will eventually outpace the inflation of these services. Recent data suggests otherwise. The Bank of America Institute reported in October 2025 that childcare inflation was rising at 5.2% year over year, which is 1.5 times faster than the overall rate of inflation. If your business costs are rising faster than your revenue, the investment thesis begins to crumble. Another counter-argument is that modern conveniences actually provide a higher quality of life than the unpaid labor of previous generations. The argument is that it is better to pay for a meal delivery than to spend 2 hours exhausted in the kitchen after a 10-hour workday. This is a respectful point, and for many, the trade-off is worth it. But the nuance lies in the difference between a conscious trade and a structural requirement. If you are too exhausted to cook because your job demands every ounce of your cognitive energy, the meal delivery isn't a luxury. It's a recovery cost. It's a subtle but vital distinction. Returning to our math moment with the Millers, let's look at their yearly trajectory more closely. Out of their $150,000 gross income after the second rent of childcare, convenience services, and transportation, they are ending the year with about $27,000 in total discretionary savings. That's an 18% savings rate, which is respectable, but it is fragile. If one spouse loses a job, or if their childcare costs increase by another 10%, that margin evaporates. To increase their wealth, they are told to work harder. But if working harder means more hours, it means more time deficit spending. They might earn an extra $10,000, but if $7,000 of that goes toward more convenience services to manage the extra workload, the real gain is minimal. The invisible nature of these costs is what makes them so dangerous. Unlike a mortgage or a car payment, which have a defined end date, the second rent is an ongoing tax on time. It is a recurring overhead that scales with your lack of presence. When we talk about the grind, we usually focus on the effort exerted, but we rarely talk about the friction created. Every hour you are away from your home creates a vacuum that the market is more than happy to fill with a paid service. Consider the cumulative impact of these small leaks. A $30 service fee here, a $20 convenience markup there. Over a decade, these amounts, if invested, could represent hundreds of thousands of dollars. But because they are framed as essentials for the busy professional, they are rarely scrutinized. We treat them as the price of admission for a modern life. However, if we view them as a second rent, we start to see that our financial freedom is being nibbled away by 1,000 tiny bites. The goal of observing these structures isn't to provide a checklist of things to cut or to advocate for a return to a pre-industrial lifestyle. Building wealth without sacrificing your life requires a cold-blooded assessment of these recurring fixed overheads. It might mean questioning the high-income, high-overhead lifestyle in favor of a moderate-income, low-friction one. When the monthly minimum to sustain your life is lower, your dependence on the grind diminishes. Wealth is often defined by what we own, but a more functional definition for the modern worker might be the ability to choose how to spend one's time without a financial penalty. If you earn a high salary but have zero time and high overhead, you are functionally less wealthy than someone with a lower salary who owns their time and has minimal fixed costs. The latter has a margin that the former lacks. This margin is the space where life actually happens, where relationships are nurtured, hobbies are pursued, and rest is found. We have to ask ourselves if the path we are on is actually leading to freedom, or if we are simply building a more expensive cage. If every raise is immediately spoken for by a new service meant to save us time, we haven't actually gained anything. We've just increased the complexity of our poverty. The most valuable asset isn't the balance in the account, but the lack of mandatory claims against it. The second rent is the silent killer of the American dream because it convinces us that we are moving forward while we are actually just spinning our wheels in a very expensive mud pit.